Hi there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. Well, you know, there's a chill in the air and the countdown to Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas has already started. In just 12 days, America will elect a new president. We're going to talk about the presidential race tonight, plus the rising cost of Obamacare and a rejected offer to sell the Detroit Pistons home in Auburn Hills. But we do start tonight with some eye-opening information coming out of a media investigation into the 63 candidates for the Detroit School Board. A team of reporters from the Detroit Free Press, Bridge Magazine, Fox 2 Detroit, and WDET-FM spent 2 months looking into the candidates' backgrounds. And here's some of what they found. 12 candidates filed for bankruptcy. 13 candidates lost properties or faced liens for unpaid taxes or mortgages, and 28 candidates were sued for unpaid bills. Now, although money problems don't disqualify a candidate, does it impact a school board leading a financially troubled district? Let's go to our contributors tonight. Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, it's good to see you, and we're starting with a little something different. We're not starting with the presidential race tonight, which is a little bit of a palate cleanser for us before we actually get into that in just a few minutes from now.
Why don't we just forget it this
we can. We're like, everyone's having the shakes. We're 12 days away, but we will definitely get to that. But I do want to start off talking about this investigation that the Free Press was part of into looking at the backgrounds of all of the candidates for Detroit School Board. Before we get into a little bit of the context about why it matters looking into their background, Stephen, I want you to talk first off about how this actually came together, because we don't usually see a lot of journalism organizations, especially you have commercial along with nonprofit, coming together. So where did the idea start, and what were some of those first conversations like about you do this, you do this?
So my understanding is that M.L. Elric, who's a reporter at Fox News, former Free Press reporter, was the person who sort of suggested this, and the idea was that all of the journalism outlets in Detroit are smaller now and less capable of deploying resources than they have been in the past, and you have this inordinate number of candidates, 60-some people whose backgrounds need to be looked into. Why don't we all work together? I think that's pretty much how it started, and I think they sort of just divided up the list among the participants and you know, looked into the things that they all agreed to look into.
Interesting, Nolan, that people are still turned to, us at public television, they turn to the newspapers as well, they turn to other television stations to try to get some of their background information on candidates, not just looking at school board candidates, but is that still the role that I think media plays in the landscape in terms of vetting this for people?
Well, it ought to be, and as Steve said, we're shrinking, so we've got to be creative. Newspapers all over Michigan this week went through another major cut down in staff. Bare bones staff were trimmed even tighter, and I think it's somewhat easier in this market to muster the resources to do something like that, but these outstate papers who have had to trim yet again, tougher for them.
I think it's also interesting, too, because it brings up the entire debate of paying for content as well. And no one really seems to want to pay for content that they can find online.
Well, I think people have gotten accustomed to the idea that it's free. And that's our fault for having gone online and not asked people to contribute something. It's really hard to after you've given away something for free, it's really hard to come back and say, well, now you're going to pay for this. I'm not sure that's the model going forward either. I think asking the readers to pay is different than trying to find, for 200 years in this country, it wasn't that readers paid for content, it was that advertisers did. They pay the freight for the newsrooms and the distribution and delivery and things like that. We need another model like that, and I think there are some ideas emerging. We're seeing some promising things in some places, but there's nothing yet that's an answer for everybody to use to sort of stop the financial side. And at the same time, of course, there's more readership of these publications than there ever has been. When you add up print, digital, now mobile, people reading newspapers on their phones, there are more people demanding the content. It's just that the financial support for it, which was never from readers, is smaller.
And it's now 25 years we've been looking for the answer, and the answer hasn't come. And you're starting to see, well, you have been seeing the consequences, and it's now starting to get to a critical stage. Newspapers have a watchdog role to play in their communities, and you need both a critical mass of readers and an adequate staff of watchdogs to play that role. And so the answer has to come soon, because some of these newspapers aren't going to
Some people
survive.
And I think it's going to be interesting too that we can start to see some more of these cooperatives. I know that Detroit Public Television, we're part of the Detroit Journalism Cooperative, which was different from the group that did this investigation. But let's jump to some of the results that we saw now here. Why does it make a difference that some of these candidates have in their background financial issues?
Well, that's for the voters to decide, I think. I mean, the idea here was to get the information out to voters so that it's available to them, and they can look at it and decide which bits of information matter the most. As a Detroiter and as a voter, I may look at that differently than somebody else. I mean, I may say, well, lots of Detroiters have financial issues, and there's a place where hardship is pretty common. Am I going to hold that against somebody who wants to be on the school board? Or I might look at it and say, finance is one of the key issues in the school district, and one of the things that we need the school board to be more vigilant about. So I don't think somebody who's had financial problems in their background should be on the board. I mean, I think those are decisions that now voters are going to be able to make because they actually have the information to make the choice on.
So they have the information, Nolan. Should it make a difference?
Well, this is, I think, the most critical election on the ballot, and certainly in Detroit, but perhaps all of Michigan. This school reform and this sort of grand plan that was put together this year won't work without a competent school board. And we've had school board members in Detroit who couldn't pass, who couldn't read, who were accused of domestic violence, who did really disgusting, perverted things with their staff, and it's been a mess. It's critical to get a very, very committed and a very talented school board, and with 63 names, that's a big job for Detroiters. I'm really disappointed that the mayor hasn't engaged and that the business community haven't engaged in this in terms of supporting qualified, competent candidates. There's been very little support for the various slates who show some promise.
All right, so you're looking for specific slates. So who should be coming forward and saying, you know what, you need to back these people? Or
I would like to see the mayor play a bigger role, and I'm not sure what explains his absence in this conversation. I think the business community, I think it's important that the unions have a voice in this. I mean, unions are a huge part of the way schools operate, protecting teachers, protecting classrooms, which protects kids. I think they should be saying, and I think some of them are saying, who they want to be. I mean, this is the entire community's responsibility to make sure that the school board is stocked with people who know what they're doing, who are committed to the city and to the kids, and are going to make decent decisions.
And yet it's been a very quiet race.
It has been pretty quiet. At the same time, I'll say I attended a forum by Citizens in Detroit last week with school board candidates and citizens sort of interacting for about 3 hours.
what was that? What was the format of it?
They had citizens sitting at tables, and the candidates sort of round-robined the tables, spent 5 minutes each talking to the different groups. So you had about 22, 23, maybe 26 candidates show up for that. I was really impressed by the range of experience and ability, by the keen interest. There are a lot of, Nolan's right, we've had a lot of trouble with school boards in the past here for a long time. I felt like the people I met at this forum were universally a higher caliber of candidate than we have historically seen in Detroit. That doesn't mean that all of them are flawless. It doesn't mean that there aren't things about individuals in that group that might give you a reason to say, hey, they shouldn't be on the board. But overall, it felt to me like a very strong pool to choose from. If you have 26, I would imagine there's probably more who just didn't show up at that, who also fall into that category. It may be hard to winnow it down to 7 for some votes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that people can also be educated as to what the school board is actually, what the role is that they're actually going to be playing now in this new iteration of the Detroit schools.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be it. They're going to be the decision maker. I think there is a financial review board in place, but in terms of the curriculum decision, the operating decisions, the ability to shape a quality school district, that's going to rest on the school board. And if they don't get it right, I don't think there's another chance coming.